Well, this all has changed a lot. It's a big mess. If I didn't know better, I'd think it was a sign of the apocalypse. But that would mean I'd see Four Horsemen. Hey there folks, Chuck here, and this is a special build. It is a Four Horsemen group build, and if you know anything about Diecast customizing on YouTube, you know the Four Horsemen are Keith at Outlaw Speed Shop, Paul at Diecast Graveyard, my friend and patron Andrew over at Maple Leaf Customs, and Xavier over at Diecast Show Customs. And it was Xavier who reached out to me and invited me to participate in this build. Basically, every month they select a casting and a theme, and they all alternate, and this was the 2Jet Z casting, and we are supposed to turn it into a Mars Rover. And that was really it as far as the rules go. Since that's all we've got to do with the rules, let's get to the breakdown. As I mentioned, we take the 2Jet Z, we turn it into a Mars Rover, which means it needs some off-road wheels of some kind. We need to replace that petrol-powered looking stuff in the back with something that looks a little more spacey. We need this thing to have some articulating arms so it can grab samples and stuff out on the Martian soil. And we need this thing to be dirty and dusty. And lucky for me, Mars is a lovely rust red, and I've got plenty of that to go around. And we're going to give this thing a double take twist. More on that in a bit. Ready? Punch that subscribe button. Let's boogie. Alright, so this is a parts bin build, so that meant no 3D prints, just what I could find. And I had this Jurassic Park Matchbox submarine that was very cool, and had almost all the pieces I needed, but I also needed some off-road wheels, and I got them for this no-name dune buggy. So yeah, that's a lot of pieces and a lot of stuff to figure out. So there was a lot of trimming and testing and fitting and experimenting, and honestly probably that was the most fun of the build, was trying to figure out what pieces I wanted to make work. Once I trimmed off the back of the 2Jet Z, the part of the submarine fit almost perfectly. There was actually a little niche inside of it that the back of the 2Jet Z, from where I cut it, fit into almost perfectly. Unfortunately not completely perfectly, so I still had to use glue, and glue on plastic and metal does not work all that great together. But before I could get too far in, Tracy noticed that my workspace was a little too bland, so she added some drawing and some color, and she showed me how she can write her name now, which is very cool. She also knows the phrase that pays.
Stay fresh cheese bags!
Thanks, Tracy. Alright, so back to test fitting and experimenting there. Once everything was back from the paint stripping, you could finally start gluing things together. But first I had to drill some dents into the panels to make this thing look like it's been knocking around the surface of Mars for a while. And then it was time to do the little Jim Silva dip in the gauzy, as Jim likes to say. I am so glad I've used that now instead of the floor polish. The floor polish is fine, but the gauzy is just so much better. So after I got the arms on, we had another paint break. Tracy showed me how she could paint a heart.
Dad, can I have a snack because I'm finished painting.
Okay. And then it was off to the paint booth. I started with a rust red in honor of the Martian red that is going to be all over everything eventually. But once that was on, I went over the ship with a pale blue because I knew that it was going to need to stand out against the reddish orange, and complementary colors work out to orange and blue. Go Gators. This is that bone white color from GameWorks, and it works really well at imitating that kind of off-white generic thing that so many electronics and composite materials of the 80s were made to be. I wanted this thing to have throwbacks to the lunar modules of the 60s and the space shuttles of the 80s. So this is the off-white that represents the shuttle from the 80s, and then we're going to get into all the metallics and stuff from the 1960s. This is a fun color. It's called Abomination Skin. It's from Vallejo's zombie line. Somebody got it for me as a gift. One of the drawbacks to the 2Jet Z is that it has the first row of the windscreen is into the casting, and I didn't realize why until I took it off. And it turns out there's a post under there, and you can't have the glass and the post. So it's an unfortunate design issue they had to work around. But I decided to make lemonade with the lemons that I had and painted it gunmetal so it'd be nice and shiny and look kind of like a welding mask that had been darkened to prevent glare from getting in on the forward part of the windscreen. It was time for some Stuart Simple mirror paint. Tires were painted with Vallejo Air Tire Black, by the way, which is a very good color to paint tires. So the mirror paint is going to be really handy because it takes a little bit of the washes and powders, but still has a lot of shininess through it. So I wanted to make sure I had plenty of that to catch light and have this thing not just look like a reddish-brown mess. Although it is going to be a reddish-brown mess. More on that in a bit. Front grabber arms are also gunmetal, just so they have a metallic look that's not too bold. It ended up being too shiny, but I put some dull coat over it, and that solved the problem. This is one of those fantasy names that I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's an alloy something or other from GameWorks, and that's a great color because it's gold but not. It's 2 silver for gold and 2 gold for silver, and works great for the top and bottom of these thrusters or whatever they're going to be on this thing. Originally they would be sitting horizontally on the submarine, but basically I took the back of the submarine and flipped it on its head to get that top thing and make it look like a radar dome. This is the Stuart Simple copper paint as well. So I basically looked for any excuse I could to use various types of metallics, and I liked that these things look like Tesla coils, so I painted them copper to give them a very electromagnetic field look to them. And this is pale burnt metal from AK Interactive, and I like this paint because if you put it on thick enough it will wrinkle and distort and look like wrinkled mylar. And so I put that on the top extra thick so it would do the crinkle. I don't think it's supposed to do that, but it's one of those happy accidents I found. And is it just me, or is there more parts in this than there should be? Anyway, here's some lenses. And of course you gotta have your starboard and your port lights. This is Tester's Gold that I tried so hard to get the cap that had frozen on it off that it broke the jar. So now it's in this little plastic container. I gotta use it up before it all completely oxidizes. But it worked really well for creating that lunar lander recreation effect and adding some contrast to some of the more generic sections of the Rover. The axles were of course too long, so I had to snap out a bit of the middle and use some super glue gel, a mix of water and baking soda to get the wheels to stay in place. Some of that dull coat going on over everything to seal it up. I like to seal everything with a clear coat before doing decals, just in case the water accidentally reactivates the paint or gets underneath it and causes a peel effect. As we know, a lot of these decals were printed by me. I have got the printer almost back to where it's ready for prime time, but it's not quite there yet. And I got a new printer that somebody gave me that actually works with my fancy printing cartridges, but I'm still getting the finer points of that down. This is burnt iron I was using to add shadows and some additional metallic effects under things to darken the do not look here parts of the ship. Then I added some gloss coat over the windscreen up front and some of the lenses and the center of the saucer on top. And then I brushed on satin everywhere else. I brushed things on instead of airbrushing them because you don't want to put any clear coat over mirror paint. No matter what you do, it's going to dull it up, even gloss. So unless you want it to be dulled, and I didn't, you have to brush it on around it. I used some Seraphim Sepia on the seat, and then switched to Nuln Oil for everything else because I wanted all of the nooks and crannies to be as dark as possible, because this thing is going to be caked in Mars dust. And it's tempting to start out with the Mars dust and just dive straight in and start throwing dust everywhere. But that's not good because you put your washes on after that and really darkens things up and you get some unexpected effects. So you want to think from the inside out, and what would be on the inside would be the liquids, the washes. So I start with null oil, and then I added the chipping effects with this AK Interactive chipping pencil, which I love. This is actually my second pencil that I've gone through with them because I used the other one so much. It's absolutely a wonderful tool. Very handy. The other pencils are okay, but the chipping one I use almost constantly. It just really adds some realism to things. I ended up going with a light rust wash from Vallejo, and it did a really good job of getting into the cracks and creating that initial layer of dirt and dust buildup and setting the tone for everything. This is where painting things blue really came in handy because it really helped there still to be some contrast. Yeah, as you can see, I laid it on nice and thick just to make sure everything felt very Marsified. And then it was time to snap it together and breaking out AK Interactive's medium rust deposits. It's a very interesting paint to work with because you put it on and it's wet and it looks terrible. But then it dries and it looks like real corroded, flat rust deposits. Or in this case, Martian soil deposits. So I wanted to make sure that was nicely covered before getting to the final bit. In fact, I actually was surprised that it was so good it created almost too much Mars buildup. So I did go over things again with a little Seraphim Seep just to darken some spots of it. You can see the really light spots are the parts where I didn't put wash on it so it would have some contrast. It's time for the decal and the number. And that puts build number 54 in the books for me. So one last time, let's take a look at what we started with. This is the Q-Jet Z from the Four Horsemen. Thank you, Xavier and other Four Horsemen, for inviting me to be a part of this. And let's see where we ended up. There we go. A rough and gritty Martian rover has definitely been working very hard on the Martian surface, collecting samples and jumping over dunes. It still has plenty of life left in it. And what's that? Something else. What could it be? Oh my goodness. It's another rover? So yeah, that's the double take twist, is that I've been building two cars this whole time, and that's going to be my modus operandi for the next couple builds, because I have been so honored and blessed by the folks who have supported me on Patreon through all this time, and some of them have made requests and they've fallen through the cracks. And I feel really bad about that. Moving forward, I am double building to reward the people from that era of support with customs of their own as thank yous. So this project will tick two people off my list, and hopefully not tick them off when they get this in the mail. This is not going to be something that I will routinely offer my patrons, because that's not fair. That's a sweepstakesy thing. But the folks who were with me very early on, there were a lot of ideas and promises that I wanted to make that I was not able to deliver on, and so this is me thanking them and making up for not holding up my end of the bargain as much as I would have liked. So if you do still want to support Diecast Media Network and help keep things going, you can always check out our Patreon, which is over at diecastmedianetwork.com, and that will support these projects and, of course, the Diecast Breakdown podcast, which has been going really well, and I'm so delighted and honored to work with Mark and David and Kimber and talk to them every day, and we are excited to start recording again. We've got some episodes in the backlog that will be coming out very soon, so be sure to punch the bell icon, because right now things are a bit erratic for channel posting, and until we get things back up to posting regularly again, the bell is the best way for you to find out if something new has come across. And if you enjoy what we do, please tell your friends or share the episodes. That's really the best way to help us grow. Again, I want to thank the patrons who helped make this possible. I want to thank you for watching and making it to the end. So thank you so much to the Four Horsemen one more time for hosting events like these that really help get the community rolling and give us something to work on together It's super cool and I love it. And I highly encourage anyone who can to participate in one of these builds, just because it's really cool to see what a bunch of different creators do with a limited challenge. All right, that's it for now. I'm going to get back to helping my wife get the house ready for our coming second child. It should be here by the time the next video drops. As always, I want to thank you for coming along with me for the ride. So until next time, stay fresh, cheese bags.